Morning, everyone. It being 10 o'clock, we'll call this meeting of the Senate Ways and Means Committee to order. And I would ask Senator Hennessy to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic.
This time, we'll open the hearing on the proposed amendment number 1294S relative to the rated business profits tax relative to suspension of the state. At this time, I will turn the chair over to Senator D'Alessandro, and I'll be introducing the amendment on behalf of Senator Bradley, who is stuck out of state and will not be back. I would expect we will not exec this bill today, as I would expect Senator Bradley to testify on it and perhaps produce some additional information next week. So with that, Senator, you have the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Call upon Senator Guida to introduce amendment number 1294S, an amendment to House Bill 1221FN. Senator Guida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bob Guida, Senate District 2, on behalf of Senator Bradley. Amendment 1294S to House Bill 1221 would suspend the road toll in the state for a couple of months with the intent of providing, if you will, financial relief to the families and businesses of the state that obviously consume that commodity. We've been hit with a 40-year high inflation rate that is driving consumer products far up above what they have been since January of 21. The gasoline back in January of 21 was about half of what it is today. Continues to rise. The U.S. was energy independent. We are no longer so. Could be, but we're not. And so we are importing gas from a number of, shall we say, less than friendly nations. Our nation has stopped drilling on leases, I should say, put restrictions on leases on federal lands, curtailing production in Alaska. Again, at the end of the day, it's driving the price up of our fuel. And for that reason, we would like to take action immediately to suspend the road toll, 22.4 cents, for the 2 months of May 1st through June 30th. And the deficit to the road toll that would be incurred by virtue of that suspension to be covered by funds from the general fund, which is experiencing significant excess. Again, that excess due in large part to business tax reductions that this body and the House and the governor have put through in the last couple of years. So without further comment, I'm happy to take any questions from the members of the committee.
Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Will Senator Bradley be here next week for us to ask him questions?
Providing he uses a different airline.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? I think just to follow up Senator Gatto and Senator Rosenwald's question. Since Senator Bradley drafted the amendment, it would be most appropriate that he be here to address it. And I think questioning you would be not appropriate at this time. You didn't draft it,
Right.
but we want to reserve the right to question Senator Bradley when he comes. So we appreciate that. Appreciate your introducing the amendment. If there were no Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Is there a difference between a road toll and a gas tax?
No. I think the terminology road toll is used to indicate a gasoline tax.
Follow up?
Certainly.
So how do we determine when you're reading something, you see road toll, people tend to think of the toll booths. Is there a particular term that separates those from gas tax?
I'm not aware. Not aware, yeah.
Okay, Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We
And
have
I'm certain, speaking for Senator Bradley, with whom I communicated, he will
Right.
be here to answer questions and so forth
Right.
Next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a number of speakers. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, member of Senate Transportation, and I didn't put down that I had a position on the bill, but I thought that as a member of the Transportation Committee who's worked on some of these issues in the past, I might be able to offer some information to the committee. And I'll just say, I'm all for giving some money to the taxpayers, okay? You know, however we do it, I like that. But I just thought I'd give you some information you might want to have about the effects of this. So we know that the average Granite Stater drives about 10,000 miles a year, and we know the average car miles per gallon is about 30. So you can do the math. For the 2 months, 55 gallons is what that driver will save. And so multiply that times your 0.224, and so this means we're going to give each driver $12.33 total over the 2 months. Now, the question might be then, how much of this will actually go to New Hampshire residents? And, you know, that's an uncertain one because we got a lot of out-of-staters who come into the state. Now, we don't know who's buying gas at the pump, right? But we do know who's going through the toll booths. And if you take the whole state and you see who's going through the toll booths, these are our main arteries, then you see that about 52% of the people who go through the tolls are in-staters, and about 48% of the people who go through the tolls have out-of-state plates. Now, there's a lot of variation in that. I mean, down at Hampton, as you might imagine, people passing through the main, it's about 24% New Hampshire and 76% out-of-state. But if you go up to Dover, it's about 67% on Spalding Turnpike, who are New Hampshire plates, and about 33% from elsewhere. So you're going to see that now the folks who are going up through Dover tolls are probably from out of state, are probably going to be here for a little bit, might buy some gas. Folks coming up 93, probably going to be here for a day or drive long enough, they're going to stop for some gas. So, you know, in some sense, what we're doing is we are making a gas tax holiday for out-of-state drivers. And so our taxpayer dollars are going to be paying out-of-state drivers to get a break on this. But the other question is, will the price at the pump actually go down? And, you know, we all know that, I mean, the price of the pump it's really set by the spot market that's worldwide. And we know that there's very little elasticity in that. You know, the gas prices tend to go up fast and come down real slow. Well, you know, guess why? But it really depends. And, the gas tax is a relatively small percentage. I mean, if gas is now, I saw from $3.92 to $4.14 driving over here. And so the 22 cents of that is 5-6% of the total cost of the gallon of gas. So what the price at the pump is actually going to be, I don't think we're going to see go down 22.4 cents. I will say, for those of us who remember when we enacted the 4.2 cent rise, I drove around the week before and the week after taking pictures of this, because there were a lot of questions. Oh, the gas price is going to go up. And it actually went down after we put the 4.2% increase in the gas tax. So
So are you suggesting we should raise the gas tax?
beats
No, just
me.
kidding, just
I mean,
kidding.
you know what I'm saying is, I'm just saying, are we going to get the bang? Are we going to get the bang for the buck? You know, are we going to? Is this actually going to help New Hampshire taxpayers? And I don't know. I will say, the House had the proposal to say, let's give everybody who registers a car That way we'd know we were giving a break to the New Hampshire folks. Now, it doesn't give you the photo op of at the gas pump with saying the prices are coming down, but on the other hand, it gets the money to the New Hampshire folks. So let's say you take that $26 million. That is in the bill. And we got about 1.6 registrations in the state. So then you're giving people $16.25 over 2 months. If you wanted to do it that way for the same money, you know that New Hampshire people are getting a little bit of relief and not the out-of-staters. And you also don't have to rely on whether or not the gas price comes down at all. If it doesn't come down, we've put $26 million of taxpayer money, and we spend it, and we don't do anything for anybody in state. So I don't know. I mean, I like let's look. We have an affordability crisis in our country, right? I mean, we know that. Inflation is, everything's going up. If there are ways we can address it. And let me just say as an aside too, I think the political language here is a little unfortunate. Again, if you go to energy analysts about what's happening, I mean, we were not energy independent during those previous years. We were still importing oil, even though we had a lot of fracked oil coming out. Well, why? There's two kinds of crude. There's sweet crude and there's sour crude. Back in the 1990s, the refineries up and down the Gulf Coast spent billions of dollars making a bet that they're going to be refining sour crude because you're going to take more sulfur, a lot of stuff out of it. It's a more expensive process, more difficult process. They made a huge bet on that. And then guess what happened? Fracking. And fracking and the shale oil, that's sweet crude. And the refineries aren't set up to refine that. And even if they'd said we're going to spend billions more dollars to retransform most of our refineries, it would take years to do that. I mean, and this is why we're talking to Venezuela. That's sour crude. This is why we're talking to Iran again. It's sour crude. That's what we're bringing in from Russia. It's sour crude. So, I just say, you look at the energy markets about what can be done about should we be pumping more of this or that. If we pump, let's pump more American oil, right? But what we're going to do with it? We're going to export it because we can't refine it all, but they could probably refine it over in Europe and get themselves off of the Russian crude. So I'm sorry to go on so long, but I just thought, give you some information about it, and let's help the taxpayer, but let's take a careful look at what we're actually doing with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Any questions from the committee? Hearing none. Thank you very
Thank
much. Is Representative Umberger?
Yes, Representative Umberger.
The jury has completed its deliberations.
Oh, is this the exec session?
Welcome, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Karen Umberger. I represent the towns of, Carroll County District 2, the towns of Conway, Eaton, Chatham, and Hales Location, all those big places up north. I'm here to oppose this amendment. And I'll provide several reasons for my opposition. The first problem, I think we all know, is that the tax is paid by the wholesalers. As a result, because of this, any station, any retail gas station receives a bill for what they've paid or what they owe to the wholesaler. Then when the gas goes there, the wholesaler doesn't care what's inside the tank. So we're now mixing gas that costs with the tax and gas that is not with the tax. And so the poor retailer has doesn't know. I mean, he knows how many gallons are in there because he measures it. But he doesn't know whether to charge the tax or not charge the tax because he has to pay the wholesaler the tax.
That's your gas bill.
Excuse me. I couldn't get my phone to work 5 minutes ago, and now it's decided. Excuse me. So we have a real problem at the retail level. And then at the end of the 2 months, we're right back to that same problem. So it's, it's whatever. And so that to me is a significant problem. And you may or may not know that I had floated this idea in the House. And I might as well have been talking to the wall in regards to garnering support for this. And I believe I heard Senator Waters speaking about, well, let's put it on registration. We also floated that bill. I had a non-germane amendment hearing on that. I came back to finance, which is our normal procedure, and that particular concept went nowhere as well. So my concern is, I certainly understand what you're trying to do, and I certainly don't necessarily agree that I agree gas prices are way too high. But the savings on the gas tax by individual drivers is relatively minuscule. When you look at it, you're not going to be really saving a lot of money. And then what happens when the gas tax goes back into effect? We're going to look terrible because we had dropped it 22, 23 cents, whatever it is. And then 2 months later, wham, the gas tax goes back up. And so to me, that's not a good idea. The second thing, or third thing, whichever I'm on, I liked your words that were in the amendment dealing with, suggesting to DC that they need to rethink what they're doing. But nowhere in this amendment do we send it anyplace. We don't send it to our senators and our representatives. We don't ask anyone to do anything with this. It simply goes into probably chapter law, and I am positive that no one reads chapter law on a regular basis. So these are the reasons that I truly oppose it. I worked hard to try to make it work and just found so many stumbling blocks that I would encourage us to find some other way to spend this money other than with a gas tax reduction. So, thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Senator Rosenbaum.
Thank you. And I guess because I have such respect for your knowledge of the budget, are there ways that you've been thinking about that don't involve this particular approach, but could use that amount of the surplus to get money into the hands of New Hampshire individuals and families? For example, could the state match money on their SNAP cards, or could the state find some other currently existing program that we take part of the surplus and don't lower the gas tax, but find a more efficient way to actually get money to New Hampshire families. Is that something you've been thinking about?
Well, thank you for the question. As you know, we provided $100 million on SWEP that has gone out to the towns, which will result in lower taxes. I'm not sure that this amount of money would make that much of a difference. And that's part of the problem as I think about the entire state. The 20 plus million doesn't really have a significant effect on the entire population. So if we wanted to target something like, increased betterment or road and bridge things, although it wouldn't be immediate, there would be significant savings in the future.
Please.
So I'm glad you brought up things like betterment, because when I read the amendment, I wondered, is that going to mean that cities and towns will start new projects with that money? Or would they use that assistance to continue with what they're already doing, but maybe not have to raise so much of the cost locally? And I truly don't know the answer,
Yeah.
because I never was on Division 1 or 2.
I think it will be a combination of both, depending upon where the town is in relationship to being able to afford, if that's the right term, road repairs, bridge repairs, and so on. Some towns are very conscious of making sure they have dollars for road and bridge repairs. Other towns, not so much.
Okay,
But, it's really town by town, city by city.
thank you.
Further questions? Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Umberger. You said you considered a number of things. In terms of considering these things, did you think about, or did your committee think about how you could implement this situation where it could really help the individual? Because you're talking about 60 days of reduction, reducing the gas tax. How could you do it? That's number one. Number two, where would it appear? Would you reduce the price of a gallon of gasoline? And then you've got regular gasoline, you got premium gasoline, and you got diesel fuel. How do you affect each one of those? How do you affect the gasoline that's in the tank that's already been paid for versus the new gasoline that will be pumped during that 60-day period? And the conditions that DOT is under right now, for example, Artificial loan, how are we handling that? How would this affect that? How would this affect the collection of the tax? Because the Department of Safety gets a premium for collecting it. What happens to all of these mechanisms? And we're doing something for a 60-day period. Who gets the benefit, and who gets to pay the price, really?
Thank you, Senator. That's the reason why I discarded it, for all of those things that you're talking about. As I discussed this with both the LOB and with safety, we had, as you mentioned, so many roadblocks to solving this particular methodology of returning money to the individuals that drive. And so, you listed everything that we talked about. And so that was why I basically abandoned that particular process.
question?
Please.
I think it is our goal to help the citizen, the person who's driving and so forth. But it seems unreasonable to come up with an unworkable situation. That's to me, that's the real crux of this. And when you've read the narrative about the findings, I'll wait for Bradley to come to discuss these, but I think some of those are just not appropriate for this piece of legislation. But I thank you for coming, and I thank you for addressing my queries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a nice day, okay?
All right, next up, speaking, neither in favor nor opposed, Tom Frawley.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. If it would be in the interest of expediency and everything, I have with me Brian Moran, who's Head of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store Energy Marketers Association. We'd like to testify together if that's possible.
Being of collegial nature, I totally
Great.
agree.
So for the record, my name's Tom Frawley. I live in Lyme, New Hampshire. My company is in Lebanon, New Hampshire. I'm a wholesaler that the previous speaker described as the guy who collects the tax from the retailers when he delivers the gasoline to them. So I supply over 100 locations in New England, several of them in New Hampshire. So as we stated, we're nearly opposed or for this particular amendment in that we just wanted to point out some of the potential unintended consequences, some of which the speakers have previous to me have spoken about, and I just wanted to articulate some of those and be glad to answer any questions about the industry. So I'd like to just break it up into a couple of different, we've been paying the price of really high gas prices, spikes in the commodities market over the last 6 weeks because of a Ukrainian situation. And to give you an example, when prices started to spike in the commodities market, and we're hearing a lot of news about that, a lot of activity started taking place on the wholesale side, which meant an awful lot of trucks started going to terminals early because, as you probably know, the commodities market operates on a 24-hour basis for when price changes are then taken into effect at the terminals where we lift the product. So the cost on any given day when we saw large increases, the cost of a truckload of gasoline 5 minutes of midnight versus 5 minutes after midnight was about $3,000. So there's a lot of motivation to change your behavior with your trucks. And we're already in a truck driving shortage, as we all know, trying to get goods and services around. So the unintended consequences of that was there was a real run on the terminals. Beginning of March, we were seeing business levels that were basically like June or July because the consumer on that side was also filling their tank up because they were hearing all this news about how prices were going up. So they were all filling up in advance, no different than a New England snowstorm buying milk at the local store. So we saw that as an unintended consequence of that. In the past 6 weeks, we've seen daily changes in the wholesale commodity market prices that far exceed what we're talking about with the gas tax. 40, 50 cents per day, up and down. And as a result of that, you've got a lot of retailers who are, I got a load of gas. The average retailer in New Hampshire does about 750,000 gallons a year. He gets loads in 10,500 gallon increments. So the smaller folks in the northern parts of our world, they might get a load of gas every 3 or 4 days. The swings in that cost of his inventory are significant. So he has to make pricing decisions based on what's in the ground and what he just got or what he might be getting. So when it comes to implementing the gas tax, we run into the same situation where if we have a date certain where we're going to eliminate the state gas tax, then we have all this inventory out there, okay, that he has to price that was talked about in the previous. So he has to make a decision. Am I going to take a loss of 24.4 cents on all this gasoline that's sitting around the state, which is billions of gallons, at any given point in time? And then at the end of this period of time, he's now going to make a decision about, boy, I better get a bunch of loads of gas in or stuff my tanks before the end of the month in order for me to eliminate having to take, pay gas tax on that, for that load that comes after midnight. So it's an unintended consequence. It's the ripple effect on the terminal system, which is already tight, and the truck driving system, which is already tight. And it would mean a retailer would be forced into a position where they're taking a loss on inventory, making inventory decisions that don't have the consumer in mind to protect themselves from this loss. So we think it's one of those unintended consequences of what would happen.
Sure.
Great comments. And people are buying on the spot market all the time. And as you say, I think, and the key element here is implementation. If you wanted to implement this, and you were buying at 5 minutes of the hour, and you were buying at 5 minutes past the hour, you've had a difference in the tax. And who would ascertain what that difference was? I mean, you can't have thousands of people out checking it all the time, because we don't have them. We just don't have those people. But I know the volatility of the market. My dad years and years ago was in the business. So the volatility of the market is even greater now than it was then.
Yes.
And I think your point is well taken. Who's going to get hurt? It's going to be the wholesaler, because you're going to have to eat the tax or pass it on. And who do you pass it on to? And when does it get passed on? This is the most problematic situation I've ever seen. When you're looking at something on a 60-day basis, and the drops are 10,000 gallons. So if you drop 10,000 at 5 minutes before the hour and drop 10,000 at 5 minutes after the hour, you have a different tax rate.
Right.
That's not fair to anybody, I don't think.
Senator Alessandro, if I can add to that, we do feel that there is a potential solution to avoid that sort of volatility that might get created as a result of this. And, because of the modern tank inventory systems that are out there, it's very easy for us to be able to document at any date and time exactly what the inventory is out there. So if a floor tax was applied to the inventory that's in the ground and also applied to the inventory in the ground at the end, we don't create this inventory nightmare situation, or the retailers who are forced to go out there and say, I'm going to run my tanks out before this tax holiday goes into effect, and then I'm going to stuff my tanks at the end of this tax holiday, which creates all the wholesale issues that we don't want. And it's an unintended, we don't want the retailers to get hurt, and we don't want them to have a windfall as a result of a tax holiday. That's not helping the consumer.
So did I understand you to say that there is a remedy for that problem?
Yes, we do. We think that, that there is an electronic method to instantaneously document date and time of exact inventory for every retailer in the state, okay? There's no question it's a paperwork reconciliation problem that would have to be worked out with, and I'm sure my friends at the Department of Safety would have a comment on this related to that, but there is a mechanism to do that, and it's done with other commodities.
Further questions? Senator Daniels.
Thank you. Do you know if the wholesalers were given a tax break, do you know if there's a requirement that that tax break be passed on to the retailers or to the consumer?
Well, the wholesalers have, private contracts with their retailers. And, in my experience of being in this business for 40 years, they all particularly articulate plus tax. So the mechanisms by which they charge their retailers for that gasoline includes a provision that says, this is the tax. So if the rate goes down, I can't collect the tax anymore.
Further questions?
Yeah, I'd like to, kind of add to Tom's testimony.
Sure, and just state your name.
You bet. My name is Brian Moran, and I'm Director of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association. And,
Yeah, bring that mic closer.
Oh, bring it closer, sure. Yeah, I think the key issues for us is, we see it in everybody's faces at the pumps all the time about the hardships, the volatility of the fuel prices. We don't necessarily, as an industry, have an opinion on how New Hampshire should spend its surplus revenues. But we do have a very strong opinion about don't take our revenues that we've already paid for away from us. And I think there's a lot of issues that swirl around this, particularly if you look to what occurred in Connecticut, where they implemented a provision similar to this without any protections for retailers. And they've been, let's see, the public doesn't know when this station gets a delivery of untaxed fuel. They don't know what that one does either. They just expect or have an expectation that, oh, May 1st, I should be able to get 22.2 cents cheaper gas. That's not going to happen. And complain, and in Connecticut, that's exactly what they did. And the Attorney General Tong in Connecticut has about 166 cases and growing of consumer complaints and accusations of gouging on the industry that are likely unfounded. But from a public standpoint, they're saying, hey, you promised this to us, why isn't it there? And so it creates a lot of reputation damage for our industry that's unfounded. And, that raises a significant concern for us. And to me, if you look at it from a very, 50,000 foot level, to do this right, it's going to take some resources. It's not going to be a flick of the switch. Whether it's the Road Toll Bureau that's going to have an administrative burden for a short period of time, or there's going to be, the Attorney General's office having additional resources to address and respond and investigate complaints. So, our position is, don't take our money away because we've already paid for it. That's all the inventory in the ground. And let us have a solution which is equitable and fair to say that, hey, up front, we'll let you know exactly how much inventory we have and be able to have a credit for that inventory on May 1st, and then stick the tanks on June 30th and know how much we owe or don't owe and reconcile them both. And to me, it's equally unconscionable to take away our money and then expect at the back end that we're going to recover it again, when if you look at that, that's really gouging, and that's what we don't want to have.
Would you be willing to provide the committee with just a short document summarizing how we would make it fair to the retailers and to the wholesalers?
You bet.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions from the committee? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim Hadley. Mr. Hadley nearby? Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jim Hadley. I live in Northwood. I'm a former selectman, elected 3 times, appointed twice. I also worked for both the state of New Hampshire and state of Massachusetts energy official. I support the portion of the amendment that pertains to the gas tax suspension. I don't believe it's a gimmick. I did submit testimony. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just want to mention that what this committee can do, reducing the tax by 18 cents a gallon, coupled with the federal proposal of their proposed reduction of, I think that's 18 cents. And also the withdrawal of more than 1 million barrels from the Strategic Oil Reserve a day for the next 6 months. Also, OPEC announced last week an increase of 432,000 gallons per day. And these impacts, I drove by the mobile gas station in Northwood today. It was 4:09 on Friday. It's 4:04 today. It was 4:11 a week ago. So I think these decreases are already taking effect. And so this will decrease the average price per gallon to $3.39, or by 17%. And the average New England price was $3.37 as of January 31st. before the Putin tax and the Russian war invasion on February 24th. And I do take exception on several of the legislative findings. I'm not going to go through each one, but the oil company profits increased $237 billion last year in 2021. And before January 21st, the legislative findings said that America was energy independent. And according to the U.S. Energy Information Agency, we imported 8.5 million barrels of oil in 2021, 8 million in 20, 9 million in 19, and 10 million in 18. So we were not energy independent in 2020. I'm not going to go over number 4, other than to say that we consume about 8 million gallons of gasoline a day out of the 20 million that we consume. And from 2016 to 20, the average fuel economy of vehicles sold in the U.S. was 25 miles per gallon. Last year, it increased to 36. So I think Washington, D.C. does have our back. And the only other comment I want to make is the Keystone Pipeline extension. And that oil, contrary to popular belief, was going to be sent overseas. It wasn't going to be going to the gasoline pumps in the U.S. Thank you, and thank you for your service to the state of New Hampshire.
Any questions for Mr. Hadley? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, and thanks for being here. Just a quick question. Do severe weather events also have an effect on gas prices? And to what extent should we expect that that's been influencing gas prices?
Yes, I think it does definitely have an impact. The pandemic, I think, reduced the demand quite a bit, and even now we're seeing that parts of China are in quarantine, so that demand should decrease as well, which will help reduce the price. But I think the weather events certainly have an impact. When they have to close the refineries in the Gulf of Mexico.
Further questions? Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony and for submitting it to the committee. You spoke about the importing of oil. What was the net import or export? The net. So you gave us the facts about the importing.
Yeah.
What was the exporting?
Well, the net is around 8 million barrels a day for the last 4 years that we had to import.
And what's the net effect when you look at the exports?
I don't have that,
Thank you.
that figure, but I'm hoping, we're moving, the U.S. Department of Transportation last week issued a ruling that's going to increase the gas miles per gallon from 36 to 49 by 2026. So there's 17 million new cars sold every year in this country. So that definitely will have an impact going forward as far as, reducing the price as more hybrid and electric vehicles get on the road.
Senator Daniels.
The figure that you just gave of the 17,000 cars, is that pre-pandemic when you could actually get parts for cars, or is it now because you're having lines shut down because they can't get things like chips and things like that?
Yeah, it said the average between 16, I looked at from 16 every year until 21, and it was between 16 and 17 million each year for the last 5 years, 17 million, and those are light trucks as well.
Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's have safety. Steve and Scott. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve Lavoie, Director of Administration for the Department of Safety, and with me is Scott Breyer. He's the Chief of our Road Toll Bureau. The department is not taking a stance on this legislation. We believe it's a legislative decision on whether to have a gas tax holiday. That said, we are the department that's responsible for collecting the state's gas tax, and so we'll speak to our ability to do so given the current language within this bill. In essence, we do believe that this provides us with the authority that we need to in order to make this tax holiday given our current systems. So first, distributors are still required to report all gallonage information during the holiday period, which is important to maintain that information, and this amendment provides us with that. We have the ability to update our electronic reporting systems to make sure that we're not automatically withdrawing funds to effectively put the tax holiday within our reporting system. So we're okay from that perspective. And most importantly, this amendment gives us the authority to waive administrative rules related to the collection of the fuel tax. That gives us the ability to change our forms so that we don't end up in a situation where we're automatically required to charge tax on certain form amounts. So those three pieces are critical for us to implement this, and they do reside within this amendment. The other piece that's partly there is replacing the funds that would be collected into the highway fund with general funds. There's an estimated appropriation here of $20 million in unrestricted highway funds. That is, based on our estimates, what we're expecting to collect. However, we don't know what the true gallonage and sales would be during the holiday period. So to make this stronger and ensure there's no impact on the highway fund, we would ask for some additional language that would allow us to true up the actual gallonage and seek an additional appropriation to close that gap. There may be additional gallons sold because which would skew our current projections, which haven't contemplated that, and we have no good way of estimating what type of increase in gallonage we would see. So that is one piece of language that would help make this stronger and ensure that we do keep the highway fund whole during this period. The other piece that I will mention, some people have spoken about the inventory concerns. We believe those are real concerns. Those are something that need to be considered. The Road Toll Bureau does not currently have a process that would require us to obtain this information. Retailers don't report inventory to us on a regular basis. So that would be a change that we would have to make with additional language, and then also developing the forms and the tools to receive that information, assess the information, and then either a credit payment or issue or receive the balance of road toll that would be due. So that would be a change that would be required, and additional language would be needed for us to implement that. And we're happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
I know, I'm taking notes too. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for giving us this information. I hear the words receive, process, assess, forms, return funds. What is the estimated cost of the department to do that?
We don't have an estimated cost. We can adjust our systems through our existing contract, so there wouldn't be a cost from a programming perspective. Our existing staff resources, again, as written, so not contemplating changes, but as written, our existing resources would be sufficient to make this happen. If we added additional requirements, truing up inventory, that's a different story.
Follow-up?
Yes.
Can you tell us that story?
I don't have the full story, but if we think about the retail stations in the state, so there are approximately 650 retail stations, 650 retail stations in the state. If each were submitting returns, we would ask for 2 returns. One would be the inventory at the beginning of the tax holiday. One would be the return at the end of the tax holiday. That information would need to be compared, and an assessment would have to be processed internally by our staff to either collect additional road toll or refund road toll based on the differences there. Those would be paper returns at this point.
Yes.
And we would not be able to implement an electronic system in 1 month's time to collect that data. So currently, from our refund staff can process about 200 refunds a month.
They do about 200 refunds a month, and during this period, we have about 650 manual returns we'd have to process at the beginning and the end of the period.
Well, thank you. If you were to go down the road of doing this process and we rewrite the language to do it, what is the additional language that would be needed to ensure that the retailers actually drop the gallon price by what we're reducing the tax by?
I wouldn't really be comfortable providing anything from that perspective. To your point, there's nothing in here now that requires a change in price. And I don't know of legislation that we have that, aside from maybe on the utility side, that would require something like that.
Thank you.
Senator Daniels.
Thank you. And this may be part of what Senator Hennessy had asked, but you had mentioned that you'd be looking for additional appropriation to true up inventory. I'm looking for a figure. I mean, do you have one? I mean, how do we finish a bill for an appropriation if we don't know what the number is?
Well, and that's the challenge with this, because the gas tax is collected on gallons sold. So if there's a 20% increase in gallons sold during May and June on the holiday period, $20 million will not be sufficient to cover that. We don't know what that will be, and that's why some sort of language that allows us to to review the actual gallonage sold and compare that to what we intended with the 20 million and request the additional appropriations would be needed. But we don't know what that amount is at this time.
Can I add to that?
I would offer this, though. My thought process is you should be able to determine how many of these handwritten inventory forms should be able to be processed by a person or two or three in a day or whatever. And that would give you perhaps an approximation of staff requirements for temporary, part-time, or whatever, something of that nature.
I misunderstood the question. I'm sorry, I was referring to so we have two different elements. One is the recovery of highway funds related to the tax holiday.
Right.
That's the true-up portion I was just speaking to. Correct. We would need to take, if we're talking about the inventory component, that would be the cost of our existing staff. We don't have the ability to hire new staff in a short period of time, so really it would be a timeliness issue. How quickly can we process those? And what Scott was mentioning, we would probably be looking at a 3-month period to work through that processing.
Thank you. Yes.
What is the department's expected lapse at this time?
I don't have a highway fund lapse estimate right now.
Senator Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your testimony. Tell me about the volatility of the expansion and contraction of the gas in the tank. We're talking about huge amounts of gas over 600 stations in the 600 stations selling gas. We know that there's an expansion component for the fuel at one time, and there's a contraction component. What does that mean in terms of gallons? If you could give me an estimate, because that has a real effect on the tax.
So, Senator, actual shrinkage and expansion is, there's a statute that's in the road toll statute that retail dealers can put in for 0.75% of all their purchases during that period and get what's called a retail dealer refund. And I don't have the exact number for that, but, and people might disagree with me, but with the way tanks are built now, you don't, the expansion and contraction is definitely below 1%. Some people from industry might argue with that, but we came up with a compromise in the bill, like 0.75%. Typically, in the summer months, it expands, winter months, it contracts, but that is true, but it's not probably as a significant amount as some people might think.
Thank you, thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Sort of following up on a question Senator Hennessy asked. If the department did figure out how to true up the beginning and ending inventories, would your department have the authority to enforce price cuts to consumers?
No, we would not.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Hearing
No.
none? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Major, you're not listed as speaking. Do you wish to speak? Thank you. Okay. All right, a lot of listening. So next would be on neutral, Marie Mullen from DOT. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Marie Mullen, the Director of Finance for the Department of Transportation. So the department has no position on the bill, but I just wanted to point out a couple of maybe technical items that the committee should consider. The first is as presented, and I believe this was an oversight, but the bill does not include any funds to replenish the betterment account. Currently in state law, 3 cents of the road toll goes towards the betterment account. It's restricted to DOT for paving and road projects. And the bill, as the amendment as written here, does not include funds to replenish the 3 cents that would be lost during that 2-month period. That's the first item. The second item is related to the TIFIA loan. Senator D'Alessandro had mentioned that earlier. There is language here to replenish about $6 million related to the 4.2 cents from SB 367. However, I just wanted to point out that the TIFIA loan, that 4.2 cents is pledged for the TIFIA loan to pay back the I-93 loan. So by supplementing with the general funds, I believe that would be okay. But just as Steve mentioned with the true-up, because those revenues are pledged towards that, we would want to ensure that there is a true-up mechanism here, that if the gallons sold exceeded that and exceeded the $6 million appropriated here, that would be replenished into that account to ensure that our covenants are met on the TIFIA loan from that perspective. So those are the couple of areas wanted to point out and just ensure that if any language is changed or considered, that those areas also be considered in this bill.
Would the department be able to provide such language?
Yes, we would, yep.
Okay. I'm sorry?
I can answer that if you'd like.
Okay, I think she already did. Yeah.
We have the language. Senator Bradley has drafted an amendment.
Okay,
Just
so
take that into account.
we may see that next week. Okay. Senator Daniels?
I was just going to mention that I had an amendment, a subsequent amendment to the one that we're talking about, 1315, which actually includes the betterment funds, which is probably what Mr. Bossi's talking about.
Right.
Right. Further questions or comments? Hearing none? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that completes the listed.
Actually, could I ask one more question?
Marie?
Marie?
Oh, yes.
Senator Daniels?
Thank you. On, we had, through the budget, we had given the Department of Transportation $50 million in a special fund.
So the highway fund, there was a transfer of general funds of $50 million to the highway fund.
How much is left in that account?
That $50 million is still in the highway fund.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. And we have an additional speaker. Paul, please. Go ahead and turn on the mic, yeah, there you go.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Paul Wasowich from Gallagher, Callan, and Gautreaux, representing the Aggregate Manufacturers Association. It was been brought up about the betterment account. I was going to bring that up, and it was answered by DOT. We need money for them. So I thought that wasn't going to be made whole. 2, question by Senator Daniels. We do not have a gas tax in New Hampshire. Supreme Court, in an advisory opinion back in the 20s, said that would be unconstitutional. That's why we have a road toll It's an extension of the toll roads that we had. And the Supreme Court ruled it's appropriate to have a road toll for the use of the roads. So that's with that, Mr. Chairman. I was glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Hearing
Thank
none?
you.
Thank you. We do have some remote testimony on 1294, the amendment. From Howland, Chris Howland, member of the public representing himself, is in support. Jesse Maderos, member of the public representing self, in support. And Clarence Skidmore, member of the public representing self, in support. Is there anyone here who has had not testified yet, wishes to, or who has testified once, would like to do so again? Hearing none, we'll close the hearing.
I always wondered why off-road vehicles, you can get the tax back, and now I know. Because they're not on the road.
Your mic's
And
on,
other
your
ones,
mic's on.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
In the boats, get it back.
Yeah,
I get it,
because they're not on the roads.
right, exactly. Because it's a road toll. Thank you.
So, I want to exec, 1097, I want to get 1097 out of the way.
Would you like a motion to go into executive session?
Yeah, let the room clear out here. All right, so we're gonna go into, we're not gonna exec this bill, 1221 this week. Obviously, we want Senator Bradley to come and answer some questions and so forth. But I would like to go into exec, to talk about, to exec 1097, for which there is an amendment that I had drafted. And I'm happy to either do it myself or bring it in as a committee amendment.
Move executive session?
Second.
Okay, Hennessy, D'Alessandro into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so under consideration, is there a motion on 1097?
I move the amendment 1328S to House Bill 1097.
And I'll second that.
Move on to pass for discussion?
Senator Daniels seconds.
Did we approve the amendment?
Not yet, that's what we're here for. We're going to discuss the amendment. We're going to introduce the amendment as a committee amendment. We'll talk about it.
All you have to do is, if the committee adopts it, then I have more or less made it.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
yeah.
can you tell us what your amendment does?
I don't know, no, just kidding. So if you recall the discussion last week with DRA, they had two additional pieces of information, one on the BET and one on the BPT. My concern was that if you bring that in and this gets challenged, that then opens those to Supreme Court fiddling, for lack of a better word, okay? If you take them out, the intent was to cover income from any, again, and the language that DRA provided was based on my concern and the desire to take out those two BET and BPT components was income from the employer-employer relationship, such as wage income, salary income, or other employee compensation earned or received by residents of the state for services performed entirely within the state, may not be subject to personal income taxation in any other state. Now, may not, to me, is potentially problematic. And I would also consider making it shall not. That pretty much draws a line. May not is subject to interpretation. I mean, I could see two sides of that, okay? May not being permissive or may not being absolute. So to remove that, I would look, first of all, are you comfortable with the main language, the main change, which is the employee-employer relationship, wage, income, salary, et cetera? Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. I'm fine with with switching may to shall,
Okay.
but I do have a question about your new language on the description in of the money that's being taxed. So you've changed earned income to personal income taxation. And I just want to make sure that by moving away from earned income, we're not potentially subjecting 1099 income or dividend and, interest income or any other personal income to taxation from another state. So I don't see DRA here, but I remember they had questions about, or they said there was no definition in state law about earned income.
Yeah.
But I just worry about opening up other income with the language that you've used. And, I mean, the bookkeeper or accountant among us probably has more tax experience than I do,
No,
but
I
I've
probably-
done
I
my own
probably don't.
taxes for a long time.
I've never done taxes.
But I wonder if DRA believes this is limited to money you get from working in a job.
And, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think the concern is that some businesses, to follow up on what Senator Rosenwald was speaking of, some businesses are set up to where the income flows to an individual, and that would be their personal income taxation or their earned income. And I'm not sure how we define, I know that we don't define earned income because that's what they told us, but I just want to make sure that the personal income taxation is, that we're using the right words, so that if somebody has a business venture in another state.
Oh, here he is. Yay.
Perfect timing. Not anymore.
Yeah, because I think we all have the same goal,
Right.
but we need to get the words right.
I don't think, my opinion, and certainly subject to your expertise, but I don't think that this amendment opens the opportunity for a state to go into unearned income, which is what interest and 401Ks and so forth are.
Well, I guess I was thinking more about income you might report on a 1099 or investment income. What if Massachusetts decided they were going to try to tax the investment income of someone who lived here? Or
What-
the 1099 income?
I'm not sure there's a nexus between that and Massachusetts,
I don't know.
but please.
Right. Good morning, members of the committee. Keen Ming Wong from the Department of Revenue. So the amendment that the additional language that we've changed here is specifically to focus the bill towards, as Senator Gaida has mentioned, towards employment type income. So investment income would not fit into the language in here.
Senator Daniels?
Thank you. As written, the amendment seems to only pertain to an employee relationship. What about the person who is paid on a 1099? I work for a Massachusetts company, but my territory is in New Hampshire. So I do all my work there. It looks like I would not have any standing in this. Contractor.
Right. So for contractor, if you're working in Massachusetts, I'm just going to think about this. Working in Massachusetts, but your territory in New Hampshire, so are you performing your performing a services in.
Sales
But performing a services in New Hampshire or in Massachusetts?
in New Hampshire.
So you're performing services in New Hampshire, and if you're a contractor, I think about this. Shall not be subject.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So an example to follow up on what Gary's just speaking of. So I normally am a salesperson in Massachusetts, a contractor for a company, and I would go door to door, whatever, vacuums. But now because of COVID, I'm at my desk at home doing that same thing, being paid as a contractor. Is that what you're talking about? Where previously you may have been physically in Massachusetts to perform your job, but now you're remote at home, but you don't have an employer-employee relationship.
Yeah, perhaps I was never in Massachusetts. I got hired by ABC Company, and they assigned me the territory of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. But the company is based in Massachusetts. Question is, can they tax me?
So, so if you're not an employee, so you're a contractor.
I'm paid on a 1099.
Yeah, paid on 1099. You're a contractor. The company that's paying you would not have any. I'm assuming that would not have any kind of withholding on your wage, on your compensation, because you're an employee. You're not an employee. From the state perspective, since you're performing services in New Hampshire and not in Massachusetts, I don't believe that you have nexus in Massachusetts for to be.
They would send that 1099 to New Hampshire's income tax if we had one, our bureau. I don't think they send a 1099 to Massachusetts for your wages as a New Hampshire contractor.
Right.
That's my thought, but maybe
So
we need to.
you'll be a so-called sole proprietor. You won't be an employee. You'll be running your own business, and therefore, whether you will be subject to Mass tax or New Hampshire tax as a sole proprietor would be a fallback to the original laws that Massachusetts may have before this the emergency ruling for COVID.
So I guess the question is, what happens now if somebody works for a Massachusetts company and let's say that they're in sales and they do part of their work in Massachusetts and part in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Does the company separate that and not tax them on the income that they earn from New Hampshire?
That's the purpose of this bill. If you're an employee for a Massachusetts company,
Talking about contractor.
yeah, for a contractor, you would. My understanding is that for a contractor standpoint, you'll be a sole proprietor, you'll be running your own business, and you'll be filing your own returns, whether in Massachusetts or in New Hampshire. Of course, when you're conducting business activity in New Hampshire, you'll be filing a business return in New Hampshire. And then that will be using business tax laws as opposed to employer-employee wage, personal income tax laws.
Are you saying that if I have my own business and I'm paid on a 1099 form, that the employer cannot take mass tax out?
My understanding is that I'm not very familiar with employer-employee withholdings rules or laws, simply because in New Hampshire we do not have that.
I'm comfortable with the answer to your question.
Yeah.
This is a little murkier for me.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please.
I think what the risk is that if this happens again and Massachusetts does the same thing, and then they also say, and by the way, if you're a contractor on a 1099, and you don't give us money, we're gonna come and audit you? Is that the risk here?
I don't see how they can.
If they're not complying with the emergency order? I don't know. I mean,
My assumption is that if you're a 1099, you're running your own business, and then Massachusetts will have to see, will have to apportion your income. Like any kind of business in New Hampshire, apportioning your income if your business activity to the extent that your business activity or your sales was performed in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire, so you apportion that income to New Hampshire and to Massachusetts. That would be my assumption that would happen.
Why don't we talk to Bruce Berkey and get SBA, and not SBA, and NFIB, they must have something on this, and also BIA has a tax accounting person on their staff. And I think that might be worth getting those guys in here, because they deal with this problem, interstate, and NFIB has, I'm sure, people in your situation.
But what about Bill Harkin? Because
Oh, he's a tax attorney.
yeah,
Sure. I'm
maybe
happy, yeah.
he would bless this.
Do you remember when New Hampshire had the commuter tax?
Com-
No, you don't. In 1973, the commuter.
He was
tax-
9.
You were 9. The commuter, New Hampshire had the commuter tax. We were taxing people who worked in Massachusetts.
Okay.
But it was declared unconstitutional. So we ought to look at that case.
How
Maybe
did
it has
they
some
get away
relevance
with
here.
taxing our people?
They did.
I mean, 25% of Nashua adults who work in Massachusetts, or did.
I'll tell you a related case. When I was flying, I was based in Seattle, flying out of San Francisco. And the California pension folks came after us for a portion of our income and also a portion of our retirement for that amount of flight time and we took them to federal court. We took them to federal court and we won. And my case was this: I can't vote in California. I'm not going to pay taxes in a place where I can't vote. And we won the federal case.
Well, when I worked at UMass, they used to take a little bit of money out of my meager salary for their pension fund because, they had the same kind of Group 2 thing we
Right.
have, but they applied it to Group 1 also. And because state workers didn't pay into Social Security there, I guess, they used to take a little bit of money out of my adjunct salary.
For the record, that was not a meager salary. This is a meager salary.
Right.
$100 a year.
My
Just
teaching
kidding.
salary.
No, I'm kidding. So I'll get a hold of Ardinger, or maybe Sonia, can you give him a buzz? And just see if he can provide, either come and talk to us about this issue? I'll do it if you, I don't normally whether you do that or not. Okay. All right. And since we'll be meeting next Wednesday, because we want to get this 1221
We all
thing,
seem to be in the same
yeah.
place on this, we just need to make sure we get it.
Yeah. And that's no reflection on you, because we don't have an income tax.
No,
And I like your ignorance of it, believe me.
I apologize, I was not able to answer your question satisfactorily.
I didn't have an answer either.
Any further questions on this? It's the only bill, so we're not going to move on this today.
Move to come out of non-public.
Are you
Mr.
gonna-
Chair,
We got to undo the second, or?
Michelle from the Insurance Department is here to answer questions on
Oh.
527.
Oh, thank you, on 527. Thank you for coming over, gosh.
Thank you.
Do you all still have a copy of the amendment? It's 1186.
I don't have a copy of that amendment. I've got a draft of it. I can share Gary's.
I've got it.
Thank you.
Yes, actually, I don't. So for the record, I'm Michelle Heaton. I'm from the New Hampshire Insurance Department. I'm the Health Law and Policy Legal Counsel.
Welcome. Thank you for coming today on short notice. Appreciate it.
No problem. I was already upstairs with House Commerce, so
You'd much rather
glad
be
I
in
can make
front
it
of
down
Senate,
here.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and
Well-
thank you for joining us. And I apologize if you were the one that was here last week as well.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were here to answer questions. So I think first, thank you for giving the opinion on it as well. My concern is, because these would be small charities, and I know that the charitable trust is different from the insurance department, but why do we have a minimum of $25,000 in unrestricted cash if there doesn't seem to be any risk with a charity performing this function of getting a donation, having up to 5 business days to then purchase an annuity for the person who gave the donation? I just want to know, it seems a little risky to me that something could go wrong in that 5 days, or the person who made the donation could be upset with the annuity that was purchased. So from an insurance perspective side of things, what are the risks here?
So, disclaimer, I was not involved in the drafting of this bill. We did propose an amendment to kind of fix some of the issues that we saw, but I would suspect that the $25,000 is to set some kind of minimum. What you would not want is someone posing as a charity that has no money, selling this type of thing, collecting the money, not getting the reinsurance, and then they're gone and you can't find them. So at least having that $25,000 minimum sets some bar so that if something does go wrong, there is a little bit of money there. But yes, there would be a risk in that period of time, and that's where the Charitable Trust Division would come in. They are the regulatory entity that oversees these charitable organizations. So if the charity is doing something wrong, the Charitable Trust Unit would step in and do what they need to do. The insurance department, we regulate insurance companies, and that's why this whole chapter, the 403E, is establishing that these charitable organizations selling these charitable annuities have an exemption where they're not going to be considered an insurance agency or insurance company. Because under normal circumstances, they would be an insurer. They're assuming risk, they're taking money, and they would need to follow our insurance statutes. The idea behind having 403E as this exception for charitable annuities is to help facilitate the sale of these types of annuities. The risk associated with them when you're talking about these larger charities is fairly minimal. The amount you're going to get back on an annuity for a charitable annuity is much less than you would if you were to go to a commercial insurer and just buy, a typical annuity. And that's because there's a charitable reason behind them. You're not just giving money to purchase an annuity, you're giving the money to help out this charity. And in consideration for that, you're going to get this smaller annuity amount for the rest of your life. Does that help answer some of your questions? So in this situation, if the charity took the money and never got the reinsurance, that would be a charitable trust issue. If they do get the reinsurance, then the insurance department is overseeing that insurance company. That insurance company has to comply with all of the insurance laws, which would be 408 relating to annuities. They'd have to comply with all of our financial stability requirements, all the typical things an insurer would do. And if they were to do something wrong, we would be actively monitoring them with our financial regulations. But if something was to go amiss, the insurance department would step in and work out the issue.
Thank you.
Senator Daniels?
I didn't see anything in here where it talks about the type of annuities that a charity may go after, which could include variable annuities in which they could lose money. Was that the intent, is that you've got a whole risk area, or, is this supposed to be restricted to fixed annuities or indexed equity annuities or something that will guarantee that you can't lose money?
Usually, a charitable annuity would be a fixed, but I would have to go back and look. I don't think there is anything that would prevent it from being a variable annuity, but that would not be in the charity's interest to issue something like that because there is more risk associated with it. And
But there's
the,
a higher return.
yeah, so the charity, the way the actuary tables are set up for these types of annuities, they have to follow those those charts, those actuarial tables. So I don't think you would be able to set it up as a variable because that wouldn't comply with the annuity charts that you have to follow for these types of annuities. And those are much narrower actuarial rates, and I'm not an actuary, so I don't know all of the science and stuff behind that. But that's why you would get a lesser rate of return on this type of annuity than a typical annuity that you would purchase from an insurance company because there's a lot less risk associated with these.
So who is donating the money? Who is getting the annuity payments? And who's benefiting? Right.
So the way this would work is, and it's typically a wealthy donor would like to make a large contribution to a charity, and they set up this charitable annuity. So they make, say, a $500,000 donation to this charity. When they make that donation, they're able to take a tax deduction that year as a charitable tax deduction. In return, the charity is going to pay the donor an annuity for the rest of the donor's life. So you're giving that $500,000, and the charity is going to keep that. And usually, it's not necessarily money; it would be property or some other kind of consideration that has a good amount of wealth. And in return, say the donor will get like $1,000 a month, whatever it complies with the actuary tables based on the person's age, how much is being donated, all of that. But that's why they're acting as an insurer, because they're assuming that risk. If that person lives too long and they're paying out this annuity, then they're paying out more than what was donated. And that's why those actuarial tables are structured to make sure that the charity is always going to win in this, because the whole idea behind it is that you're giving to the charity. It's not a typical annuity like you're going to go out to a commercial insurer, whereas in a commercial insurer, they're going to give you an annuity, and if you live long enough, it may be structured in a way that you're going to make out and the insurance company loses. So that's where the risk is.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. So, and maybe you can't answer this, but why would a donor do this instead of just on their death leave that $500,000 to the charity?
So
how do they gauge the difference between what they get from the annuity and the amount of money they might make on investing that $500,000?
So part of the reason why you would give it ahead of time instead of on your death is to benefit the charity. So if you give that large sum of money or property to the charity now, then they can use that to make more money for their charitable endeavors. Whereas if they have to wait for you to pass in order to get that donation, they're waiting maybe 20 years before they can actually do something with that property. And this, when you do give it to the charity, I believe it is restricted to a certain amount, but you could still maybe be making interest or some kind of income off of that initial donation. And the charity would be able to keep that income throughout the time, and then would get the full interest in the property or money once the donor is deceased.
I think there's also the tax benefit to the donor.
Yes, and there's
right?
the tax
You have to
benefit.
write off $500,000
Benefit
yeah.
now versus
Right.
to their estate when they die. Well, I mean, there
Yeah.
would still be a tax benefit, right? It's just timing. I mean, if you were really rich and you were going to hit the $22 million estate tax,
I'll let you know when that happens.
yeah, okay. There would still be a benefit, wouldn't there?
I'm sure. Senator Henderson was next, and then Senator Gammers.
Thank you. So every question that the committee asks, I come up with more questions. So just based on what you were speaking of, The donor makes the gift, the charity goes out and buys the annuity, the donor gets.
No. So for the typical charitable annuity, the charity is the one paying out the annuity. So they're assuming the risk. There's no insurance company involved at all. Under this proposed amendment, the charity would then go out and buy a policy.
Okay, so the charity goes out and buys the policy, and who is making the policy payments?
Insurance company.
The insurance company is paying out the annuity to the donor.
I mean, sorry, so it's a lump sum policy purchase? Because usually when you buy an insurance product, you have to pay a monthly payment?
Yeah, so this would be a little, you can purchase life insurance and annuities in a lump sum initially, or you can purchase them on a payment where you're going to pay
Okay.
so much over a certain amount of time. These types of annuities would still be a little bit different than the typical annuity that you would buy from an insurance company. So it would be structured so that the charity is still getting a benefit from it. So if the donation, say, is that $500,000 again, the insurer would probably have some agreement or something set up with them already so that they can reinsure this. And again, the way the statute is written, it's reinsuring it, not necessarily buying an entire policy. So the amount that would need to be reinsured technically based on, all the actuarial principles and all the administrative fees and everything may only be $400,000. So that charity is still keeping kind of that $100,000 and they only have to pay $400,000 to make sure that the insurance company can properly administer the annuity for the rest of the donor's life. But again, this is all very speculative. I have no idea what these figures would actually look like.
So the insurance company gets the this is all, gets the 500. They keep $100,000 and they're done. They don't have to do anything because the charity doesn't have to do anything. Sorry, the charity keeps $100,000.
They're done means the charity's done.
Charity's done, and then the insurance company is paying that annuity. So there's no
Yes.
more risk that, to the person who donates, that the charity is gonna go out of business and not make these insurance payments.
Yes, that's correct. The insurance company at that point is assuming that risk. Well, they probably would have gotten their money up front anyways, but if there was some kind of structured payment over time, either way, the insurance company is assuming that risk, that, the donor outlives the amount that they accepted, all of that stuff. And they would have to do all the administrative handling of processing the payments, keeping track of people, all of that typical stuff.
My understanding, you're next, but my understanding, when you do an annuity, you may answer this, don't you just put money, you don't pay monthly payments towards that annuity, you put a lump sum in and then you have an expectation of a return, am I right?
It depends on the type of annuity, what you're talking about. If they're receiving something on a monthly basis is called an immediate annuity. So in this case here, the wealthy person gives, from what, your example, $500,000 to the charity. The charity takes $400,000, goes to an insurance company, says we want to turn this into an immediate annuity so that the wealthy person starts getting a monthly income. So there is no further payment. It's a one lump sum payment, and in exchange for that, they dole it out over the course of the lifetime. It's all factored on your expected age that you'll live. If you live longer than that, you get a bonus and they keep paying you. If it's shorter than that, then,
They get the bonus.
well, it depends on how it's structured, because in some, the insurance company may keep the money. In other cases, you're going to assign a beneficiary, and the beneficiary may, so for instance, if it's a 20-year type thing and you die within the 20 years, your beneficiary will get whatever has not been paid out. But the part I think I was missing was that the charity could hold on to a certain amount of that.
Yeah, it would depend on, so the charity, with this amendment, if the charity is selling, one of these smaller charities is selling the annuity, they get in a contract, and based on that contract with the donor's expecting a certain amount of payments. The charity could then negotiate something with an insurance company, as long as the insurance company is assuming all that risk, and what those payment terms look like, how much money the charity gets to keep, whether there's going to be a remainder that may go back to the charity, all that would be negotiated with the insurance company. But In all circumstances, the insurance company is assuming all of the risk and is going to be administering this product and making sure the donor gets the payments.
And to Senator Rosenwald's question, it really makes no sense for somebody to give a charity $500,000 and have that charity put that into a $500,000 annuity because they don't get to keep anything.
Right.
And then all of it goes back to the original person, so.
I have one more question, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Lou's got this.
Okay.
I gotta run to
Thank you. So who else is making money on this transaction? The financial planners? And whose pot of money are they actually getting paid by? Is it the insurance company or the charity or the donor?
So are we talking about how it is set up now, the
Well,
traditional charitable annuities, or with this amendment?
With this
with the-
amendment.
Okay. So with this amendment, the charity can be a smaller charity. It can be more of a local charity. They're going to benefit because they're going to get this large donation. And these annuities really only make sense for very large donations. You wouldn't do it for $1,000. That's not going to work out. So the charity gets their donation. The donor is able to take that tax credit for their charitable donation, and then they're going to receive the annuity. Once the charity reinsures it with an insurance company, they have no more risk, and they don't have to do anything to administer this annuity. The insurance company is going to assume all the risk. They're the ones that are going to be administering the product, and depending on how this reinsurance agreement's set up, they're probably going to make some money off of it. How much money depends on what the insurance contract says. It could be that they're just going to accept an administrative fee for doing this, and the rest of the money will go back to the charity if they're feeling very charitable. Or it could be that they're going to have an administrative fee that is going to come out of this money that the charity is going to pay to cover how they're going to service this, and then if the person dies before their life expectancy, maybe the insurance company gets to keep that, or maybe they split that money with the charity. That's all negotiable. So for these types of situations, the donor gets the tax break, they get the annuity. So depending on your financial situation, that could make sense for them because maybe they need to get their tax deductions in order for a specific year, so they're going to make these types of things, but they still want to be able to have some income. I don't know. Not a financial planner, so I'm not exactly sure how that would work out.
When we, if I could, we had at the hearing this financial wealth manager come in and testify in support of this bill. So I'm assuming that wealth managers or investment managers are going to make money if this bill passes. And so my question is, where's that money going to come from? Is it the donor, the charity, or the insurance company?
I'm not sure, but I'm assuming if you're in a charity and you want to set up this type of program, you're probably not going to have the expertise to do it in-house. You're going to have to hire someone to help you structure these products to make sure they're meeting the requirements.
Okay.
Those people are probably going to expect a fee in return that may come out of the donation. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
I can answer based on my own is that the company will give 3 to 5% of
The insurance company?
the insurance company.
So maybe they get paid by
I'm
both
not
the
sure if every
insurance
insurance
company
company.
and the charity.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, the insurance company probably pays the 3 to 5% because they've got that money that they now can invest over a long period of time and probably garner back more than what they're paying up because it's a one-time thing.
Okay.
Whether all insurance companies work the same as the one I work for, I don't know.
Typically, too, when you have an insurance agent selling an annuity or life insurance product, there is a commission involved that the insurance company is going to pay that agent. I am not sure exactly how that would work in this charitable setting because, again, you're trying to get money for the charity, so maybe they take a lesser commission or they waive their commission. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions?
Yep.
It seems to me the commission's a big deal in this outfit, in this sale. I think.
this is more just an opinion. Do you think that somebody who gives money to a charity, and let's say the charity only keeps 20% of that and puts the rest of it into an annuity, do you think that donor should be entitled to a charitable donation of $500,000?
That's well beyond my expertise. I'm not at all familiar with tax deductions, so.
A different explanation of the amount of the tax deduction the donor got, that they only could deduct the difference between the full amount of their annuity and the full amount of their donation.
I have no idea, I don't remember us hearing that, but if they have an annuity, then that would be income. So I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be taxed.
I think the amount of the deduction is not the full amount you're actually donating. It is a lesser amount. How that's calculated, I'm not sure.
I think I chose the wrong profession.
Well, under the current statute, if you're talking about charities doing these types of things, it's not insurance at that point, even though it's in insurance statutes, because they have that exception. So we don't have any numbers on how much this is going on. Again, this type of product is really only going to work for very large donations. So I don't know how much that's going on in New Hampshire. I mean, the amendments, we just want to make clear that if these smaller charities are allowed to do that, well, yeah, and once they reinsure it, this is an insurance product, the insurance department is going to regulate it. There is no exception because it's a charitable annuity that you're not going to be subject to regulations. You are, so.
When I had spoken to Mr. Donovan of Charitable Trusts, he had not expressed concern, particularly on the original bill at the hearing, but he did have concerns of the suggested expansion by that financial manager to donor-advised funds. But I see this amendment doesn't contemplate that.
I think the department would have more to say, I think, if that type of amendment was considered, because the charity has an interest in their charitable endeavor, and that's why we consider those lower risk and that an exemption from insurance statutes would be appropriate. If we're talking about some other entity that isn't necessarily those charities, those interests shift a little, and an exemption for that type of entity may not be appropriate, but.
I think that was his concern as well.
On the annuity, who would be we know that the donor would be the annuitant. On that, who would be the owner? The charity or the?
The charity would be the owner.
Okay.
If you have any other further questions, please feel free to reach out to the department. I am just a life and health, and usually I deal with major med, but I got drawn into this. We do have an actuary and another attorney who does life insurance and annuities. So.